Hello, my name is Monster Hunter, and in July of 2023, I released a series of videos called How to Actually Improve at Monster Hunter. From that point forward, I polished my style and learned how to better present the subjects I was discussing. Now, in preparation for WoW's release, I'm here to introduce How to Actually Improve at Monster Hunter Remake. For today's video, I'll be covering the system mechanics revolving around monsters. The main adversaries of the Monster Hunter series are obviously the monsters, who come with unique appearances and attributes that create different experiences in battle. Despite these appearances, monsters still operate under the same system and mechanics, and by learning those aspects, players can be better prepared and perform more efficiently. However, there's a lot of systems going on in Monster Hunter, from your own weapon and skills to the environment and to hidden monster parameters. We'll go over monster-related systems one by one, starting with monster parts. A monster's body is made up of parts that have numerical values associated with them called Hitzone Values. These values, which can be found in the Monster Hunter Rise's Hunter's Notes, or on third-party websites, determines how much damage a part will receive when struck, and the weapon's ability to penetrate that part. The two damage categories are raw and elemental. Raw, or physical damage, is the base damage dealt by the weapon and is influenced by the attack stat. Element is the bonus attribute attached to the weapon that deals extra damage alongside raw. These damage types are not universal, as there are various damage types that interact with hit zones differently. When looking at a monster's hit zone values, you may recognize the symbols or wording above each row. Raw damage has three different categories: cutting, blunt, and projectile. Cutting, or sever, is relative to blades, which are capable of cutting a monster's tail off. Blunt, or impact, are generally hammers that can build up exhaustion with every hit and stun monsters when attacking the head. Projectile, or shot, comes from the bullets or arrows fired from a gun or bow. As you can see, these categories have their own respective hit zone values. A raw hit zone value of 45 or greater is considered a weak spot and allows any weapon or ammo to strike through regardless of sharpness level. The lower the value, the higher the risk of being deflected. Your weapon's sharpness level affects this greatly. If you strike a part that has a value of 30 with green or yellow sharpness, you'll strike through with no hit pause effect. If you strike the same part with orange, you will be deflected. Element is divided into 5 different types: fire, water, thunder, ice, and dragon. Elemental hit zone values, on average, range from 0 to 30, with 0 being an immunity and 20 being weak zones. However, there are exceptions, as some monsters may have 35 to 40, or final boss monsters of older games with values higher than 40. Unlike raw hit zones, low element values do not cause deflection. If you have two weapons with identical raw values, but one has element, the weapon with element will deal slightly more damage. You may have noticed during your gameplay that monsters will fall over or step back after being attacked. This is a damage reaction and is the response monsters have after receiving a fixed amount of damage to a part. The 3 damage reactions are flinch, topple, and part break. Flinching is when the monster reels and can be represented in various ways, from a brief pause to an overdramatic stumble. Topples are when the monster is knocked down for a period of time. This is the most desirable effect, as the monster will not be able to act during this time, which allows players to attack, set up, or heal without worry. Part break is when a monster part is permanently disfigured for the rest of the hunt. Aside from just receiving bonus materials, part breaks can appear as flinches, and in some cases, a topple. Each monster part has a threshold for how much damage they can receive before the reaction takes place. Flinch and part break have their own separate thresholds, while topple can take place for a number of reasons. We'll be using Rathian from the quest The Queen's Garden in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, with a focus on her head. In order to flinch Rathian's head, you have to deal 1,682 damage, that being the damage threshold for the reaction to happen. To break the head, she must receive 3,364 damage and will have similar animations to the flinch. Normally, you wouldn't be able to topple Rathian by attacking her head, but there is an exception. While airborne, if you reach the flinch or part break threshold, then she will be toppled out of the air. A universal fact of all monsters is that flinching or breaking certain parts while they're airborne will cause a topple, but there are numerous ways to topple them regardless. One such instance is by dealing enough damage to their leg, or by flinching a certain part multiple times. Another interesting fact about damage reactions is that their thresholds are constantly being affected even when the monster is already flinching or incapacitated by any means. Whenever the damage threshold has been met, it will instantly reset back to the initial value. Let's say you topple Rathian and continually hit her head. You could reach the flinch threshold several times before she recovers, which, if you're lucky or counted your damage, could lead into another flinch scenario. Monsters have various phases throughout the battle that can affect several stats. These are known as states and refer to the monster's condition over the course of the hunt and can be triggered by certain interactions and thresholds. A state can affect the monster's move pool, behavior, and mechanics for a brief period of time. The four states are base, enraged, altered, and exhausted. Base is the monster's default state where their stats are normal with a limited move pool. A monster's stats are their base damage, base speed, and damage received from the player. Enrage is a timed state where monsters have increased damage and speed after receiving a certain amount of damage. During this time, they can also gain access to new moves, modified hit zones, different item interactions, new mechanics, and or receive more or less damage from players. The telltale sign of a monster enraging is a roar followed by visual cues such as puffing breath or physical changes. Altered states are temporary or permanent changes to a monster's form that allows additional changes to stats, attack properties, and mechanics. Not all monsters have altered states, but those who do have various reasons for entering them. In most cases, a monster's altered state can be subdued by dealing enough damage to a part or the monster in general. Sometimes, a monster's altered state is directly tied to their rage. Exhaustion is a reductive state monsters enter after running out of stamina. They will temporarily have reduced stats and detrimental actions. Monster stamina is used through certain actions, after particular damage reactions, and when afflicted with the exhaust status ailment. A strong majority of Elder Dragons are immune to the effects of exhaustion, but there are some that can still suffer from it for far less time. Lastly, monsters have an increased likelihood to leave the area in search of food to restore their stamina. Earlier I mentioned weapons that have elemental properties, but I neglected to discuss another attribute weapons can have, which are status ailments. Status ailments cause debilitating effects to monsters and come in 6 forms: poison, paralysis, sleep, blast, stun, and exhaust. Poison deals a fixed amount of damage to the monster every second over a period of time. Paralysis will immobilize a monster temporarily. Sleep puts the monster to sleep and doubles the damage of the first attack that hits from any source. Blast deals a fixed amount of damage to the part that was last struck when the effect activates. Exhaust consumes a fixed amount of a monster's current stamina. Exhaust is applied from any blunt damage dealt, and the amount varies on the attack that was used. Stun, or KO, briefly topples the monster. This is applied by blunt weapons when striking the head, and, like Exhaust, has different stun values depending on the move used. Status effects do not happen immediately, as there is a hidden system behind it. Weapons with status have a 33% chance to activate on every successful hit, and apply the value represented by the weapon. This is known as build-up, and is the hunter side of the system. Monsters have initial tolerance, tolerance increase, and maximum tolerance. Initial tolerance is the starting value threshold required to inflict the status. Tolerance increase is the value added to the initial tolerance whenever a status occurs. Maximum tolerance is the highest threshold the initial tolerance can reach. Let's say you have a status weapon with a value of 20 and the monster's initial tolerance is 100. Its tolerance increase is 150 and the maximum tolerance is 700. You would need to hit the monster and have the status activate enough times to reach the value of 100. Once the effect takes place, the tolerance increase will be added to the initial tolerance, so in this case, 150 plus 100. This makes the new initial tolerance 250. Each time the status effect is achieved, it will increase by 150 until it reaches the maximum tolerance of 700. From this point forward, the initial tolerance will no longer increase when the effect is achieved. Unfortunately, build-up does not remain forever. A fixed amount of status buildup will be lost periodically. This is known as buildup decay. The universal loss of decay is 5 points every second. However, it is not lost all at once, but instead 1 point every 10 seconds. Per the last example, a monster with an initial tolerance of 100 against a weapon with a status value of 20 would sound like it would only take 5 applications of buildup to activate. That would be the case if there wasn't decay. In addition to the effects applied by weapons, items can also have varying effects against monsters. Of course, only a select few can actually hinder the monster in a non-lethal manner. Those items are flash bombs, sonic bombs, and traps. Flash bombs blind the monster and for a period of time will attack randomly within the area. If a monster is airborne, they can be brought down with a flash. Sonic bombs create loud sounds and can be used to flinch monsters, force burrowers out of the ground, and even stop powerful attacks. Traps temporarily immobilize a monster. Beware, not every monster can be trapped, as some have biological immunities and elder dragons cannot be trapped. Monsters are affected by items differently, as some are more susceptible or resistant than others and mirrors the tolerance system. With the exception of sonic bombs, monsters become more resistant to items with each subsequent use, reducing the time they are affected. These aspects are duration, reduction, and minimum duration. Duration is the time a monster will spend affected by the item. Like initial tolerance, this is the starting value a monster begins with and is always at its highest. Reduction is the value subtracted from the duration when the effect takes place. Minimum duration is the lowest threshold the duration can reach. In this case, I'll use flash bombs as an example. Our example monster's duration is 20 seconds, reduction is 4 seconds, and minimum duration is 5 seconds. This means the first flash will last for 20 seconds and reduce the next duration to 16 seconds. This will continue to be reduced by 4 seconds each flash until it reaches the minimum duration of 5 seconds total. I know this section was a lot, but it gets easier by just understanding the more you achieve a negative ailment, the less effective it is the next time. Alright, that's it for the monster mechanics. This was basically just a summary of a few videos I've made over the course of 2024, watered down to be more digestible to newer players. I have a feeling the game teaches enough about the hunter facilities and continual playtime will assist with making better choices, so I never focus on the hunter related systems. The combat, on the other hand, has a lot of nuances that I feel isn't necessarily explored by the in-game tutorials. Maybe they should hire me as not only a switch axe consultant and ambassador, but an actual tutorial maker. Anyway, if you want the topics discussed in this video with more depth, check out my other videos on the subjects and look out for the next video coming soon on combat. Until next time.